Hello everybody, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at the latest polling data from every swing state and talking about which candidate, first of all, has momentum and, more importantly, is on track to win the state as of today. So we'll be looking at the most recent surveys, 3, 4, 5, if we have as many, and characterizing each state according to the results of those surveys. Now, obviously, this is not my official prediction. I am just merely reporting data. I'm kind of the messenger here. I will be releasing an official prediction within the next 9 or 10 days. I try to do one now every 3 to 4 weeks because the election's moving so fast. So subscribe and stay tuned for that. And then also there are a few states I've colored in lightly for each candidate here. In the cases of Kamala Harris states, we have Colorado and Virginia. We don't have any polls for Trump states, as well as Nebraska's 2nd district. For Trump states, it is Alaska, Texas, and Iowa. These are states that you could put kind of in the borderline competitive range, but except for, I'd argue, Texas and Nebraska district 2, not really. I would like more polling data out of these states. I actually think we're getting a Texas poll very soon. There was a Texas poll that came out, but I don't think it's a 538 pollster, so we won't be talking about it. It had Trump up by 6. But with that all being said, the states we do have polling data available for, we will be taking a look at, or the competitive states we have polling data for, we will be taking a look at. So with that being said, we're going to go in geographical order here. We're going to start with Nevada, which is a toss-up state. So we're starting off very competitive state. And would you know it? Kamala Harris up by half a point in Nevada. So if you believe the polls, she's up by 0.6% at this point in Nevada. No one is close to 50%, so by no means is this race even close to being over. Expect to see a lot of money poured in from both sides to this state. Now, Trafalgar, which is a GOP pollster, they had Trump winning Nevada by about a point in 2020. He lost it by 2.5. They have Harris down by 3. Redfield and Wilton, which is a nonpartisan pollster that has historically overestimated Republican support, they have it a tie. POS, decent pollster, Trump up by 1. In Morning Consult, Harris is up by 2, and then in Redfield and Wilton from a few weeks ago, Trump was up by 2. So I guess the silver lining for Harris out of that poll is that Trump's doing 2% worse than he was last time. But again, Harris leads by half a point right now in a very close state. And I don't think anyone would argue Nevada is not close right now. Now let's go to Arizona. So Arizona, to me, is another toss-up type state. And we're going to take a look. And again, like Nevada, the polls here are functionally a dead heat. Harris up by 0.3%. She's at 45.1%. Donald Trump at 44.8%. And if we take a look at the latest polls, Trafalgar, they had Trump winning Arizona in 2020. This time they only have him up by 1. And by the way, I think they also showed a very close Senate race in 2022. That Senate race did not end up being that close, with Mark Kelly, the Democrat, winning by 5 points. And then you go to High Ground, which is a kind of a more unknown pollster. Harris is up by 3. Redfield and Wilton, she's up by 1. PPP, which is actually a Democratic-aligned pollster, but their samples tend to be very good for Republicans, so it's kind of a mixed bag there. Trump's up by 2, and then POS, Trump's up by 5. Now, the good news for Trump is that he does lead in more pollsters, but in the 3 latest polls, they're all concerning for him. And the fact that Trafalgar only has him up by 1, when they've historically overestimated Republican support by a lot. Again, they had Martha McSally winning the Senate race here in 2018. They had, I think, a tied race between Kelly and McSally in 2020. They had Trump winning the state in 2020 as well. I think the latest slew of polls are concerning for Trump in Arizona, but it's still, by all means, a pure toss-up. Now, in New Mexico, we only have 1 poll. It's not as much of a swing state as Nevada or Arizona, so we're not going to spend as much time on it. But just to keep you informed, Kamala Harris leads by 7. I don't think that's that great of a result for her. If she wins New Mexico by 7, I don't think she's winning Arizona, because Arizona tends to be about 9 to 10 points left of New Mexico. But Arizona is a blue trending state. New Mexico is not a state I'd characterize as left trending. And on top of that, these things are not all, in terms of correlation to each other. States aren't always the same election to election, so make of that what you will. Now, our next state we're going to go to Minnesota, which is the home state of Tim Walz, the Democratic nominee for Vice President of the United States. In Minnesota, we have pretty good polling for Kamala Harris. Again, this is a state that Hillary Clinton won in 2016, so Trump has yet to win here before. Not really a high chance he wins here again. If you look at the latest polling data we have post-dropout, we saw the Fox poll had Harris up by 6. She was up by 3 in Redfield and Wilton. She was up by 10 in Survey USA, which they collaborated with they were sponsored by the local news stations here, St. Paul, Austin, and Duluth. They found Harris up by 10 over Trump, and that was immediately following the dropout. And then in Redfield and Wilton, again, they saw a 2-point swing towards Harris. They had her up by 3 on the 24th of July. They have her up by 5. They had her up by 5 in their latest poll from August 3rd. So that one is going to go in the likely column. Now, getting back to some toss-up states here, let's go to Wisconsin. Now, Wisconsin, right now, if you take a look at the polling, very important state, Kamala Harris does pretty well. She's up by 3.3%. But there's a big caveat to that. In 2016, if you looked at the polls, Wisconsin was the only state that Donald Trump was behind by a margin outside the margin of error and won. They were wrong in Michigan, they were wrong in Pennsylvania, they were wrong to an extent in Florida. But in all those states, Donald Trump was well within the margin of error, especially in states like Florida, which I think was actually a dead heat on election day. In Wisconsin, Trump was down by nearly, I think, 4 or 5 points, and he still won. And in 2020, it was even worse. Trump was down by 8.4% on election day. He came within 0.6 of a percentage point of winning Wisconsin. So 2 times in a row, Wisconsin's polls have severely underestimated Trump's support. This is actually his best year yet, if the polls stay at a 3.3% lead for Kamala Harris. The good news for Democrats is that in 2022, a lot of people, including myself, expected a polling miss that favored Republicans. We did not get that. In the governor's race, Tony Evers was in a dead heat. He won by 3.5. And in the Senate race, we saw Mandela Barnes down by 5, or I think 4 points to Ron Johnson on election day. He came within 1 point of winning. So 2022, we kind of saw the reverse of that. But both times Trump has been on the ballot, it's been a swing that favors him. Now, if we take a look at the polls specifically here, they've been very good for Harris. She's gaining as of late. And if you look at the average, she was up by about a point on the 1st of August. She's now up by 3 times that. So in Bullfinch Group, which is a independent pollster we don't know a ton about, don't have a rating from FiveThirtyEight yet, she's up by 9, which is good for her. Insider Advantage, this is a GOP pollster, had a lot of good results for Republicans in 2022 that did not, manifest. It's a tie game. And then you go to Siena, New York Times poll, one of the best in the country. Harris up by 4% when you push undecideds. And then, you go to the more local polls like Marquette, Kamala Harris. When you get their likely voter screen, you push undecided voters. She's up by 1 as well. So we've gotten a bunch of polls. They all show Kamala Harris winning. But Wisconsin, there's no state other than Wisconsin where Trump has beat his polls more, I think, except for potentially Ohio, which we'll get into in a second. But keep an eye out for this state because no matter what the polls say, you should always be skeptical. Now, neighboring Michigan is kind of similar. The polls there haven't been as bad as they have been in Wisconsin, but this is a state where Donald Trump has been underestimated twice. Right now, Kamala Harris up by 3.3%, the exact same margin. She's at 46% of the vote, which is pretty good for her. It's a good point to be in August. Could be better, but it's decent, I would say. Bullfinch Group has her up by 6. Insider Advantage, this is a GOP poll. She's up by 2. That's a very good sign for her. And then New York Times Siena, she's up by 4 as well. Now, Redfield and Wilton did show a Trump lead here a few weeks ago, but again, that could change when they release their more recent polls. So in Michigan, Kamala Harris takes a lead there as well. Now let's go to Ohio, which is just south of the border in Michigan. We actually don't have an average here yet, I don't believe. But if we take a look, we've had 2 polls, or actually only really 1 poll since the dropout. Fabrizio and Lee, and in their likely voter screen where they push undecided, Trump is up by 10 points. That's a solid win for him. He won this state by 8 points in 2020 as well as 2016. This would be a 2% improvement for him, and it would likely make it a lot more difficult for Sherrod Brown, the Democrat running for Senate there, to win re-election. So a 10-point win in Ohio wouldn't really electorally mean much for Trump because he's going to win the state no matter what, and I feel confident saying that. But we do know that Republicans have a Senate race there they desperately need to win, and we do know that if Trump wins Ohio by 10, he's likely winning neighboring Michigan and Wisconsin. So that's what's interesting here, is that in 2020, Wisconsin and Michigan, to start with Wisconsin was about 8.5 points to the left of Ohio. In 2016, it was, I think, 7.5 points to the left of Ohio. So it was pretty similar. And then in 2016, Michigan was similar. It was, again, I think maybe 7.8% to the left, or rounding up to 8% to the left of Ohio. Then in 2020, it swung a bit more left. It was around 11 points to the left of Ohio. But the polls this time around, if Trump's up by 10 in Ohio but down by 3.5 in Michigan, that's a 13.5% delta between those states. So what we get here is that the polls in Ohio are good for Trump. The polls in Michigan and Wisconsin are not good for him. So they're going to be wrong somewhere. I doubt Trump is losing Michigan, Wisconsin by more than he lost by in 2020 while doing 2% better in Ohio. So again, keep that in mind, but I'm just saying what the polls are reporting. Now let's go to Florida. We're going to go down south here and kind of work our way up. So in Florida, we don't actually have an average yet, but we do have a more recent poll. It was finished being conducted on August 11th by Suffolk, which is a pretty well-respected pollster. I think they have a B+ grade from FiveThirtyEight, so they're decent. Trump's up by 5, which at this point I think could be a concern for him. Generally, if he's winning the election, I think you'd be expecting to win it by maybe 8 or 9, maybe even 10. But a 5-point lead for a Republican in Florida, never bad because the state has historically been close, although recently it has been zooming towards Republicans. And then we had one other poll or actually two other polls since the dropout of Joe Biden. Trump's up by 7 in University of North Florida, and he's up by 6 in Redfield and Wilton. So on average, he's up by 6% in Florida, which is a bit less than you'd expect him to win it by. But still, in 2020, he was down by a couple points, and he ended up winning the state pretty decisively. So I wouldn't be too upset about that if I were a Republican. And Georgia, this is another toss-up state. We're going to talk a lot about it a lot. And the polls have it a toss-up. Trump's up by 0.1%. It's a statistical dead heat at this point, but there's been movement towards him in recent days. I think Kamala Harris actually had it even, although, again, a swing of 0.1% isn't too much to write home about if you're Trump. But let's talk about it. Trump is up by 2 in Redfield and Wilton. A decent pollster there. He's tied in for Breeze Only, which is his own pollster, so that's not a great sign for him. But again, Trafalgar only being up by 2 there isn't good. Trafalgar had Trump winning the state by 5 points in 2020. He ended up losing it by about 0.3%. And then Trafalgar also had Herschel Walker winning that Senate race in 2022. So they historically haven't been that great in Georgia. And they've, again, this is a poll that's aligned with the Republicans. They overestimate Republican support time and time again. So keep that in mind. So I think the Trump plus 2 margin there isn't that impressive. But then again, Democratic Commission pollster PPP Harris only up by 1. So I think both ways you can kind of make the case that neither candidate's doing all that well. But again, that's why it's a toss. That's why both candidates have room to improve, but both candidates are doing okay so far. But again, if you believe the polls, Donald Trump will win Georgia by 0.1% today. It would be incredibly close, even closer than 2020. Now, neighboring North Carolina. Let's go to that state. North Carolina, I think, is the last swing state we don't really have an average in just yet. I'd like an average there, but we need a few more polls. But the good news for our calculations is that Donald Trump is ahead in all of them. He's only tied in one poll, which is YouGov Blue, Democratic-aligned YouGov poll. They did 802 registered voters, which isn't a great sample. I'd like it to be likely voters, and you'd like it to be a bigger sample in a state like North Carolina, which is pretty big. We're not polling New Hampshire or Minnesota here. We're polling, North Carolina, which is a lot bigger. Kamala Harris, 46, Trump, 46. But that's a Democratic pollster, and she's only tied there. If you look at Trafalgar, Trump's up by 4. Signal, Trump up by 3. Redfield, Wilton, he's up by 3 as well. Morning Consult, when you push undecideds, he's up by 2. So all good polls for Donald Trump. I think the Trafalgar number could be a little stronger. But again, Trump plus 4 outside the margin of error. I don't think they'd be wrong by that much. North Carolina would go to Trump by between 2 and 3 points if you average out these polls and weight them. So our final states here, we got Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, and Maine. Let's do New Hampshire and Maine first because it's all going to come down to Pennsylvania unless Kamala Harris wins. Even if she wins both in Maine and New Hampshire, she will still lose the election. So let's talk about Maine. Maine right now we have only a couple of polls. If we look at these, don't get distracted by these polls. We'll talk about those in a second. But if you look at the statewide polling, Harris is up by 8 in the UNH survey, and then when they push on the side, she's up by 9. So that's going to be a likely margin for her. And then you go to the 2nd district, Trump is up by 2% when you push undecided voters, which is not good at all for him because he won the seat by over 6 points in 2020. It's a white working class seat. It's right trending. And again, you would expect, truly, if he wins the election, he should win Maine's 2nd district by 7 or 8 points. And he's only up by 2 in that poll. So that's a concerning result for him, but it still gives him the electoral vote that he needs out of Maine. If Trump wins 1 electoral vote out of Maine's 4, he's still definitely could be on track to win re-election, although it's not too predictive. If we go to neighboring New Hampshire, though, it's not good for Trump. Take a look at the most recent polling data we have. Emerson, he's down by 6. St. Anselm, he's down by 7. UNH, he's down by 6. What's interesting is that if you take a look at the St. Anselm poll, he's down by, and here we go. St. Anselm, he's down by 6. That was finished on July 25th. Even if you go back, literally, less than a month, in the days following the debate, they did a Trump versus Biden matchup before Trump had dropped out. They found Trump up by 2. So against Biden, Trump wins by 2. Against Kamala Harris, he's down by 6 points. That's an 8-point swing in just a month towards Kamala Harris. That's concerning for Trump, so he's going to lose New Hampshire. It all comes down to Pennsylvania. Most important state in the election. Let's talk about it. If you go to the polls right now to win the whole election, Pennsylvania 19 electoral votes, Kamala Harris, a lead of 1.6%. So that would be in the tilt column for her. She'd be winning it by under 2%. She'd win it by the skin of her teeth. Now let's talk about Pennsylvania. There's been a movement towards Kamala Harris in recent days. If you take a look at where the polls were at the beginning of this, this month on August 1st, let's see. Harris is up by 0.3. She's now up by 1.6. So we've seen a bit of a shift towards her, although not a huge one. Bullfinch Group has her up by 4. NYT Siena, one of the best polls in the country, she's up by 4 as well. Trafalgar, she's only up by 2, or she's only down by 2. And this is again a pollster that had Dr. Oz winning the Senate race in 2022, had Trump winning the state in 2020. And again, they're showing her down by 2, so that could be a lot worse for her. all things considered. Now, this is concerning for her that she's down by 2 in Redfield and Wilton, although, again, that was conducted 2 weeks ago. To Fabrizio and Lee, this is a GOP-aligned pollster. They have it tied. I would say that's actually pretty bad for Trump. So broadly, the polls do favor Harris here by a little bit. And, right now, the polls we have released, I think you can reasonably expect Kamala Harris to do well in those polls. And, Trafalgar, the fact she's only down by 2, the fact she's tied in a Republican poll commissioned by Trump's pollster, that's also very good for Harris. But again, it's a toss-up state for a reason. And if you look at 2020, Trump was supposed to lose the state by 4.7% on Election Day, if you believe the polls, and he lost it by 1.2. And in 2016, he was supposed to lose by, I think, 1.5 or 2 points, and he ended up winning it. So in this state, in 2 straight election cycles, has Donald Trump been underestimated. And again, these polls look awfully similar, especially in Pennsylvania, to 2016. And in 2016, Donald Trump did win that election. So that's what the polls say. Again, let me know what you think. Let me know if you disagree with this map. Again, this is not my official prediction, but this is what the polls do say. So I'll continue to talk about it. To make sure you don't miss another one of my uploads, do subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications. We've got 3 months till the election, really less than that, actually, really more like 2.5 months till the election. And if you want to stay informed, be on top of all the news, and understand who's going to win, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and I'll see you all in the next one.